Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's wrap up week 13 with Silmarillion Saturday. Now, these Saturdays are our chance to revisit the history and legend of the Elder Days, whether from the Silmarillion, unfinished tales, or more. Last week, after reading parts of the story of Hurin the Steadfast, we took a quick break and read of Thingol and Melian. After all, Hurin's story intersected with theirs on more than one occasion. This week, though, I want to completely shift gears and talk about one of the more intriguing and mysterious peoples in all of Middle-earth, the Druidine. Now, if you've only ever read The Lord of the Rings, you'll have met one, Han Brichan, even though he wasn't identified as a Druidine in The Lord of the Rings, but as the leader of the Woses, the Wild Men. I'm going to read today from Unfinished Tales, Part 4, Section 1, but I will have to skip around a little bit just because there's not enough time. Now, we start out by reading about the folk of Haleth, one of the three people of the Edain. Tolkien then tells us that the strangest of all the customs of the folk of Haleth was the presence among them of people of a wholly different kind, the like of which neither the Eldar in Beleriand nor the other Atani had ever seen before. They were not many, a few hundreds maybe, living apart in families or small tribes, but in friendship as members of the same community. The folk of Haleth called them by the name Drug, that being a word of their own language. To the eyes of elves and other men, they were unlovely in looks. They were stumpy, some 4 foot high, but very broad, with heavy buttocks and short, thick legs. Their wide faces had deep-set eyes with heavy brows and flat noses, and grew no hair below their eyebrows, except in a few men, who were proud of the distinction, a small tail of black hair in the midst of the chin. Their features were usually impassive, the most mobile being their wide mouths, and the movement of their wary eyes could not be observed, save from close at hand, for they were so black that the pupils could not be distinguished. But in anger they glowed red. Their voices were deep and guttural, but their laughter was a surprise. It was rich and rolling, and set all who heard it, elves or men, laughing too, for its pure merriment untainted by scorn or malice. In peace, they often laughed at work or play when other men might sing. But they could be relentless enemies, and when once aroused, their red wrath was slow to cool, though it showed no sign save the light in their eyes, for they fought in silence and did not exult in victory, not even over orcs, the only creatures for whom their hatred was implacable. The Eldar called them Druidine, admitting them to the rank of Atani, for they were much loved while they lasted. Alas, they were not long-lived, and were ever few in number, and their losses were heavy in their feud with the orcs, who returned their hatred and delighted to capture them and torture them. When the victories of Morgoth destroyed all the realms and strongholds of elves and men in Beleriand, it is said that they had dwindled to a few families, mostly of women and children, some of whom came to the last refuges at the mouths of Sirion. We then learn about some of their amazing skills. They're great trackers by scent, they have an incredible knowledge of plants, and a real talent for wood and stone carving. And there I'm going to pick up some more. Sometimes these images were strange and fantastic, or even fearful. Among the grim jests to which they put their skill was the making of orc figures, which they set at the borders of the land, shaped as if fleeing from it, shrieking in terror. They made also images of themselves, and placed them at the entrances to tracks or at turnings of woodland paths. These they called watchstones, of which the most notable were set near the crossings of Teglin, each representing a Druidine, larger than the life, squatting heavily upon a dead orc. These figures served not merely as insults to their enemies, for the orcs feared them and believed them to be filled with the malice of the Ogorhai, for so they named the Druidine, and able to hold communication with them. Therefore they seldom dared to touch them or to try to destroy them, and unless in great numbers, would turn back at a watchstone and go no further. They also had this amazing talent, the ability to sit perfectly still and silent for days on end with their eyes closed. In fact, there's a story among the people of Haleth about this. On a time, one of the most skilled in stone carving among the Drugs made an image of his father, who had died, and he set it up by a pathway near to their dwelling. Then he sat down beside it and passed into a deep silence of recollection. It chanced that not long after, a forester came by on a journey to a distant village, and seeing 2 Drugs, he bowed and wished them good day. But he received no answer, and he stood for some time in surprise, looking closely at them. Then he went on his way, saying to himself, Great skill have they in stonework, but I have never seen any more lifelike. 3 days later, he returned, and being very weary, he sat down and propped his back against one of the figures. His cloak he cast about its shoulders to dry, for it had been raining, but the sun was now shining hot. There he fell asleep, but after a while he was wakened by a voice from the figure behind him. I hope you are rested, it said, but if you wish for more sleep, I beg you to move to the other one. You will never need to stretch his legs again, and I find your cloak too hot in the sun. I love that. Now, at the time that we encountered Han Brihan in the story this past season on the PPP, my co-host at the time, Marcel Aubron-Boules, better known as the Tolkienist, and I, spent a great deal of time digging in and discussing this fascinating people and their hard history. For more on that, check out episodes 285 and 286 of the Prancing Pony podcast. Now, next week, I'll read one of my favorite stories in all of Middle-earth, The Faithful Stone, and we'll spend a little bit more time talking about the Druidine. For now, though, it wraps it up for today's Silmarillion Saturday. Come back for more of the Elder Days every Saturday as we open up the pages of Middle-earth history. And if there is a first or second age story you want to hear me read and discuss, please let me know by emailing barnabin@theprancingponypodcast.com. Please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to learn how you can support the show and get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, a bonus weekly episode, and a lot more. Finally, join me again next Monday as we start week 14 of today's Tolkien Times with Mailbag Monday. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Please follow or subscribe in your podcast apps, and follow @Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.